Hi, Brian.
Hey, Katie, how are you?
I'm doing well. I can't get Discord to open all the time on my work computer though.
Oh.
So I've asked
Yeah.
tier 3 for permission to like utilize it, and they're like, well, why are you using that? Because I want to.
Yeah. Right. Oh. So yeah, I find one of the things I find frustrating is for some reason, and I just don't. I would ask about it, but I just don't want to get into it. On my Surface, like I'm constantly logged out of things that I want to not be logged out of.
Yeah,
Like my Chrome browser. Like every time I go open my Chrome browser, I have to log back in.
that is frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, it's a first world problem for sure,
It
but
is. That doesn't mean that it's convenient or that it helps you do your job.
yeah.
Good afternoon, folks.
Greetings.
Good afternoon. Excuse me.
Come on. Hmm. Hmm. Hello, everybody.
We are continually to set standard of excellence for healthcare. Our entire staff is dedicated to your well-being.
I think someone's on hold with something. I can hear it in the background. I hope you figure it out. Being on hold is not fun. Well, we've got some of us on. We'll give people another couple of minutes. So just for a like chat topic as everyone's signing in, who's ready for Christmas Eve? Oh, we got a number. Excellent. Who is desperately not ready and needs help? I have a few things I need help.
Who's ready for it to be January 1st?
Yeah.
Oh,
Great. Mhm.
As someone taking a renewal leave in January, yes, I am counting those days down.
Fantastic. Oh, it just saw in the chat. Melissa shared with us her husband's in the hospital and she's on the phone with the doctor. So Melissa, we are definitely praying for your family. That is not a great time of year to be not well. Not that any time is. We're gonna give people enough minute or two to hop on, but would someone like to lead us in prayer when we come to that time? Any volunteers? No, I got a book I can pull. All right, I will open us with prayer when we get started, but think about if you're willing to pray us out for later today. Let's do another minute. See who else is able to join us. Okay, let's get started and folks will join as they join. So I use this book a lot for prayers. It's called Ash and Starlight, Prayers for the Chaos and Grace of Daily Life. And there's great seasonal prayers in here. And so this is one for, for Christmas that I'm going to adapt just a little bit. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, you've asked us to be a womb for you this Advent, to be a space where your love grows and your grace expands. You've asked us to let the sides of our soul stretch so we might become large with your promise. And doing so has pushed us to the farthest edges of who we are. You've asked us to grow for people who never say thank you or I'm sorry. You've called us to care for children who pull us to new levels of selflessness. You've softened our gritted teeth in tough phone calls or repetitive criticism, all while our soul groans with growth. And in the pain, you enlarge us, and the swelling, you dwell within us. And when we question whether or not we can make any room in our lives for you, the one who asks everything of us, your spirit brings us forward in its quiet, miraculous way. You whisper in the midst of our lives, and you help us to be filled. And so, Jesus, as we prepare for you to be born in me, be born in us, be born to us, be born for us. Thank you, Lord Jesus, Emmanuel. Amen. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is a kind of a check-in time where we can share questions and we can update each other on things that we've been hearing and get more information about the work that we have ahead of us. And so I want to start today. We're going to take a little bit of time to just share what we've been hearing across the connection. And then near the end, we'll take some time to talk about our tool for sharing resources about Discord. And I'm hoping by then my Discord will work because it's not because of the firewall at the conference center. And then we'll have a chance as well to just hear any updates. So first, I want to just open it up. What are the kinds of things that you're hearing across the connection as you think about the work before us as a delegation? Anyone have things that you've been connected with, you're hearing, you want to share? And maybe to give you some space to think about what you want to share. I'll offer kind of insight I had. I was on a call for UMC Next, and I was kind of sharing my hopefulness for General Conference and all the things that are before us and the possibilities I see. And it was surprising to me that that was not reflected in some of the other areas of our connection. I think folks in the Northeast jurisdiction in particular are not feeling as hopeful. And part of that was their last jurisdictional conference was not easy. They were supposed to elect 3 bishops, and they had a lot of conflict around intersectionality and compromise and how to, who's going to advocate for this, and ended up only electing 2 because they could not come to an agreement. And so that was a really painful experience for a lot of them. And so they're carrying that pain with them as they prepare for General Conference. And so they're not feeling as hopeful. And that was just interesting to hear. So that's something I've heard across the connection. What else are you hearing, experiencing?
I had an interesting first conversation with my subcommittee so I'm on Faith and Order, and I'm on a task force for that's dissecting and digesting Set and Love. And our first call, we couldn't make it past the observation that the first name on the list in the preface for Set and Love is one of the chief architects from WCA for the Global Methodist Church, and for one of the first bishops for that organization. And the fact that his name is associated with that document just completely shut the document off, which is otherwise maybe a bit behind or a bit outdated, but a rather aspirational document in many respects. So I sense that same thing, Katie, and that combined with the kind of the persistent news that I'm getting out of mainstream UMC about the potential workings behind the scene with the African delegation is just really disconcerting at this point.
What else are you hearing? Or you think we should pay attention to?
Katie, I was reading the news article and the related information on what are the next steps after the commission met in person, and they had that article about being the commission's convention center. I thought it was interesting what they were sharing what is next, and hearing that we're going to have the online version of the updated materials here in January, about a month from now.
I haven't seen that yet, Nisa, so that'll be a good thing to share on our channels. Anyone else have things you're hearing or seeing?
Katie, this is Lindsay. Sorry, I'm driving, so I'm trying to figure out how to participate and drive. There has been some good communication coming out from, communication about regionalization, which for us would feel kind of basic. But I do think it could be a great tool to share with our congregations or people that might be interested. So I think that could be something we could use to help people understand regionalization.
Yeah, it's after Ask the UNC, right?
Yeah,
Yep. I think that would be really helpful. And I linked to that in the Discord channel. So when we get folks access, I think that'd be super helpful to share on our social media, but also we could potentially use it in our own congregations and other congregations we may be speaking with.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else? Do we have any updates? I see Erica and Barry are both online about the special session coming up and the Episcopacy Committee. Any further conversations we should be aware of?
No, actually, I've actually got 2 emails that I'm working on to Bishop Beard about that to see if I can learn any more, and also to coordinate our work because our committee will be actually in Chicago when that happens with the College of Bishops. So we typically have met that evening as in a joint meeting, and so we'll be having that jurisdictional conference at that time. And I believe they're leaning on us to make the presentation of the motion, and then they will be following up with discussion. So we'll see how it goes. That's all I know.
Sounds great.
Has there been clarification about the elections and shuffling of our groups and what that means for that jurisdictional meeting?
There has not, and I have reached out about that and haven't heard anything. Nitsa, I see you also shaking your head.
I reached out about it. I haven't heard anything. They're calling, that's in that article that came out this week, is the first time that I saw the word provisionally elected. That's, but no, I haven't heard any official word yet.
Katie, I will mention that the queer delegates have been meeting, and we're hoping to have a meeting with the bishops in February, just to voice some concerns and so forth and process.
Sounds good. Do you know, is that in conjunction, is that jurisdictional or general church-wide?
General church-wide.
Okay, so maybe in conjunction with their College of Bishops meeting or council?
Right. We've been given a permission to set up a meeting with them.
Awesome. So maybe shifting from the things you've heard, we talked about some questions we had at our last meeting. Are there lingering questions for you that that either we as leaders or others who are in the know can try to suss out? So do we have any lingering questions or curiosities that we need to address?
So one thing that I found interesting, I keep mentioning this article because a couple of things struck me as interesting. One of the things they mentioned there is that they expect regionalization is such a big piece of legislation that is expected to be handled in the conferences committee. But according to that article, they were saying that they're going to allow all the committees to have some time to consider the regionalization. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I thought that was interesting. It's almost like giving everybody the opportunity to think about what would be the implications of this to even the work of each committee. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's how it sounded to me.
Interesting.
Lisa, when we were in, well, I guess all of you, when we were in Chicago, the conferences committee met, and we were talking about a concern we have around who holds regionalization, because we're actually concerned that it could go over to the connectional people, because they're a standing committee and it can be taken away from conferences. And so like, we were just having that conversation around what could that look like. And I have a lot of questions on how it's actually gonna work out for us to work through the legislation.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And hopefully the article will help clear some of those things up, but also if any of us are assigned to the administrative committee on reference, that would be a really good, like, to keep those considerations in the back of our head, because ultimately that's the group who decides where things end up. But also, if conferences or any of your groups, for example, if there's legislation that someone else has that you want to consider, then a request can be made to the committee on reference to have that brought over. So it might be helpful as we're reading through, if you're looking at stuff not within your own legislative committee, to note this relates better and maybe should be considered in this group. Any other questions?
Katie, this is
Yes.
Kay. As an alternate, I'm sort of not real clear about where I should focus as far as who I'm paired with, who do I follow as their shadow,
Yeah,
or where other people, or what should I be looking at?
that's a great question. I will, let me see if I can put this in the group. So, we had sent this to y'all right before the Chicago meeting because there were going to be those breakout sessions, which not all of them met, with legislative assignments. And this is based on the reality that instead of getting to choose where we went and reorganize, we have to move up in the order of election to the open spots. And so based on that and based on some knowledge of who we had going where, I don't know if I can paste this into the chat here, but I will for sure post this on Discord and email it to everybody. Let's see if this works. So these were the committee assignments that we sent. Nope, your message is too long. So I will get that sent by email. That we had sent so that we could be partnered and have a team to work on those sections. So I will make sure everyone has a copy of that again. Great question.
I just have a question if all the different, I know groups were being organized, but I haven't heard anything from general admin organizers for a while. Are all the groups, are we aware of others meeting or just wonder? So I know that general admin hasn't been meeting that I'm aware of.
Yeah, my group meets once a month.
Independent commissions meets also once a month, and it's been really good because there's a lot of new people. Like I'm new as well, like it will be my first time, and there's a few who are veterans, and they've been very, very helpful, and they have shared good resources. Last meeting last week that I'm shared with anybody interested, or I'll just put it in Discord. There's like a cheat sheet for Robert Rules of Order. They also have the Kentucky Conference handbook for when it's going to be in 2020, and it's very helpful. So those are good resources that I'll share.
That'd be great.
And I'm just curious if the same, so in the lot of the conversations that the ones that I have been hearing, the priorities that get communicated are regionally, and I'm not going to name them right, but there are 3 or 4 priorities that almost everyone seems to be stating. I'm wondering if those are consistent in the groups that you are meeting, or if there's something else that is coming up as, no, this is higher priority than that. Are we hearing a pretty consistent message along those lines? And I think it's regionalization, removing the harmful language, the social principles. I may be saying those in the incorrect order. Does it resonate what I'm asking?
Yes, I get what you're asking. So that's something I've heard as well, is that the different groups that are meeting, there's been this discussion if we have to prioritize those, that's where some of the conflict is what gets prioritized. And so I'm gonna put these in the chat. These are the ones that Nitsa just mentioned. I actually think it'd be helpful for us as a delegation to spend a little bit of time talking about that, because that may be a thing that comes up, if you're a general conference delegate in these kind of friendly conversations in the legislative committee teams. But as a whole delegation, whether or not you are going to be seated at general conference, this is where your input's really helpful. So these kind of 3 things have been coming up consistently: regionalization, removing the discriminatory language, and the revised social principles. And on the one hand, they're kind of like a 3-pronged fork, but on the other hand, there's a question of, let's say we can only get one or two of them, where do we put our effort? So I want to open that up for the group. How do you understand these things? And what might you lean towards as far as if we had to prioritize those?
So I guess for myself, regionalization is sort of the realistic big goal, but at the same time, I don't want to have to sacrifice the language for the sake of getting there. We can set up a path where we do regionalization and then language. But I think we have enough momentum that we should try to achieve both and not settle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with Nate. I mean, I want to say that regionalization is so important for us to move forward as a denomination, but if we put aside removing the harmful language, I think that that is not true to the work that we have been doing and working so hard to achieve. So I kind of put them together. And then I think of the social principles, and that's so vital. So I don't know.
This is Mike. I one of the conversations I heard from someone from the Philippines was that that delegation tends to vote against anything that the U.S. delegation is pushing for. So I'm almost wondering if the regionalization we should take a backseat on and let the people who brought that regionalization motion do whatever we can to help them to promote that legislation, because it's their legislation. They have a really good rationale for that. I know that sometimes it's difficult for us in North America to take a backseat, but then just to figure out how we can be helpful to them, but not be the primary movers.
That's a really interesting insight, Mike, that, this is not our table. It's the table that belongs to all of us, right?
I have a question about the global social principles. I haven't been paying close attention to that. I love the Methodist social principles. That was one of the things that sold me in becoming Methodist when I moved to the US. And then I learned that they're not, what do you call it, enforceable, or that they're optional, for lack of a better word. So I'm like,
law.
yeah. So is there a move to try to make it actually other than just ink on paper that looks good? Because I wouldn't really, my point is, I wouldn't worry about if it's going to be like as it is right now. I mean, it would be good, it will look good, and we can show everybody like, hey, look what church believes. But then if we're not actually going to be getting things done based on that, I would put my energy somewhere else.
Anyone else want to take that on?
Well, I've been following it pretty closely because, like Alejandro, it's pretty vital to why I remain United Methodist. For me, I've been really focusing on that, the revised ones, because that's often the one place that I can help people understand Christianity, understand United Methodism, especially as we get ready to come into another election year. So.
My understanding is that the social principles do not have the force of law, but there are rules in our discipline that are based upon those. And there are things that we do based upon them, and resolutions that are based upon them. So one of the things, when I think about this conversation and why I think this is a three-forked prong, the revised social principles does not include the phrase homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. Because in the effort to revise the social principles, they wanted to make things that were globally accessible. And so it's also not US focused. It does not include that language. One of the things I've heard is, let's say we can't do regionalization and the removal of discriminatory language doesn't pass. If we pass the revised social principles, we could make a case and argue before the Judicial Council that because it's no longer in the social principles, we should edit the other parts of the discipline to remove that language. So it's kind of, I mean, like it's a cart horse kind of thing. But that's one of the pieces of that. It doesn't have the force of law, and yet it is used to justify places where we do make other kind of UMC legal arguments.
Thank you both. That was very, very helpful.
And that's kind of my question is, do they have to go in a certain order to make it work better? Because I want them all, but like when I was at leadership in Kansas City, the bishops there kind of made it sound like regionalization needed to be the focus for the other two to happen. Like, I don't know.
I don't either. That's my simple answer.
So as I see things and try to follow it, the thought for regionalization first is that it would create a simplified general conference that could then be regional for all other matters that make it the 2-week meeting that it is. So hypothetically, if regionalization is first, then the social principles and the changing of language, if we just looked at it in the what could be done in the US, those would be pretty quick, if not guaranteed, kind of changes. There'd still be folks voting against it. It wouldn't be a universal, but it would be a more guaranteed. We'd be able to do that in the US if we have regionalization. So part of it is that, like, if we're looking at it as dominoes, that's the biggest one that has to fall to get other things in motion. At the same time, the hard part and what I still wonder in the back of my mind is, with the called 26 and nothing really said about that other than the future of the church, what's going to be the hypothetical agenda for that? And I imagine it'll all depend on what actually gets done next year, and we won't find out till the final gavel. But that's what are we going to accomplish next year, and what will still be on the table for 26 if we're looking at a 2-prong process.
So here's a question, and I'm trying to think about this from another angle. What would happen if we don't get regionalization? I'm trying to think of the scenario of 2019. And there was so much attention, can we go forward with a one church plan? And it just didn't work. So are there other pieces of legislation that are likely to take so much more importance even than this top 3? Is there something else that could come in and say, well, we want to spend a lot of time on this other thing, and then even those 3 priorities don't get addressed?
I haven't heard of substitute motions. Don't know if other folks have heard rumblings of that, but I think the biggest question for the United Methodist Church, if we don't do any of this, or if we get sidetracked by it, it becomes a question for the College of Bishops and what gets enforced based on the modified traditional plan that's in place after 2019. Because so far it's been, charges in abeyance. So part of it has been different maneuvers to not fully enforce that. But if we go to this next one and we don't have any sort of step forward, then we're still living under those disciplinary realities. And then it becomes a question of what what do the bishops do when they've said hold under abeyance, wait till change, wait till this next general conference? That creates a whole potential legal mess that I think we really, really want to avoid.
Just from the perspective of the pew, I think we need to do a lot of explaining about regionalization, in that my folks, I think, pretty clearly understand what I mean when I say remove the discriminatory language from the discipline. They get that. That's reasonably clear and straightforward what that intends. But I think a lot of people don't get how regionalization is important or why it's such a big topic of discussion. I just have people saying, well, let's vote the language out, which is totally, I want to see that. But I think it's largely people in denominational leadership circles who kind of understand the regionalization piece. And I'm not saying I understand it fully. I've heard some good explanations, but I think there's still a lot to still be shared.
Absolutely. And I think if we don't educate the people in the pew about that, so Nitsa's initial kind of question down this thread was, what happens if regionalization doesn't pass, was part of that. Regionalization passing doesn't just depend on general conference. It also depends on the ratification at all of our annual conferences. And so that work of education is going to be really key and important in the next 6 months as we prepare for that. One of the things I see is if it doesn't pass. So when I think about, like, let's say these things happen, let's say regionalization doesn't pass, but we are able to pass removing the discriminatory language, and we were able to pass the social principles. In some ways, the social principles helps with globalization, not regionalization. They're kind of different types of things. One's to say, here's a more universal set of standards for everybody, whereas regionalization would say, well, each group can kind of make their own standards. So I just think that's an interesting dynamic. I think we could still achieve some equity in the sense that these are the more limited things that we've all agreed to, rather than this is just a US focused thing that's then applied on other people. I think that's a possibility, and I think our church would still be moving in a positive direction if regionalization didn't pass. But I think it's necessary. But
Katie, I don't know how many on the line right now who were actually at 2019 General Conference. But my experience at 2019 General Conference was watching regionalization work against us as a general church. The general church itself was unable to move forward because there were things that we wanted to do in the United States that were not acceptable outside the United States. And if we don't achieve regionalization, the numbers of delegates to General Conference from outside the United States will continue to grow, and the numbers of delegates to General Conference from the United States will continue to shrink. And we will not have the ability to do what everybody seems to want to do around the table, which is to clean up the language and remove the language that is discriminatory in our discipline, because that's not going to happen in places outside the United States. And I watched the delegates, the coalitions and the conversations divide our church when we had people from outside the United States voting on things that they could change and do whatever they wanted to do when they got home, but we can't. And we've tried our best, and I like what Nate was talking about. Our bishops have led in a way that have tried to keep things at abeyance. But when we get to 2024 and we don't do regionalization and we don't change language, we're stuck with what we were before. And that's not where many of us want to be. And so I think regionalization is a critical issue. It is a critical issue, but it's only the first step. The second step, if it doesn't happen at General Conference to change the language for the United States, then we need to have that regional conference that will change the language for the United States. And the patience of people who have been harmed by the church is gone. I mean, we've been patient, we've been waiting, we've been working for 20, 40 years, some of us, to try to get some of this changed. And our patience is gone. And those of you who are younger, you don't have any patience. It needs to be changed now. And frankly, the regionalization, when I was sitting at General Conference talking to Kay, was like, this is wrong what we were doing at General Conference in 2019. And it happened. And I was aghast at the church. And it's like people were voting from Africa on things that they didn't have. Well, they were coerced into certain votes. And it was a sad situation, the way things happened. And so if we don't get rid of that kind of work and become regional so we can do what we need to do in the United States, we're going to lose people on both sides of the spectrum, and we'll continue to shrink. So I think the language has to be removed. If we can do it at General Conference, hallelujah. But we got to get regionalization so that we can be the church we're called to be in the United States.
Does anyone have a sense of the power balance, speaking directly about regionalization? Like, I would assume most US delegates would be up for it, but in terms of how many votes would be from out of the US and, you know, what the position would it be?
Does anybody remember Chicago when Lonnie was talking through vote estimates? I think he said we were still 40 or so short from African delegates. The US was assumed vast majority. Northern Europe was assumed vast majority. There were some other areas that were questionable, and then it was, I think he said 40 votes away from being not guaranteed, but looking like we have it.
What I remember is it was like 40 to 50 in order to remove discriminatory language for votes outside the US. And that it was like 130 needed for votes outside the US to pass regionalization because it's a higher threshold, because it's constitutional amendments. And so we need 2/3.
Yeah, Katie, that's where my memory is. And I think that's why there's such a big push right now to really be in front of the African delegation. So, you know, when Dave Knuckles shared with us the movement for African delegates to get together and have those conversations, the same thing is happening. You know, we see the WCA, they're raising money right now to try to do the same thing, but yet coerce, I guess probably is the best word I can come up with, the delegates to not pass regionalization, because I mean, that's a significant number of people. And so those votes are up in the air.
What I see is a communications war in central conferences, that there's dual messaging. So I think the groups like the African Forum is those delegates who are trying to advocate for regionalization. And then there's also the Good News folks who are bringing in a counter message. And so it kind of goes back to what Mike said, this idea of how do we help support the folks from central conferences who took what the connectional table did and brought this idea of regionalization to the next step? How do we support those voices? Because when I see this isn't necessarily that the U.S. is imposing our idea on others. This is the church has asked for this, and so yeah.
So I really appreciate the way you said that, Barry, because it provides a little bit of even more background than maybe not all of us have. And what it really sounds to me is that each one of us needs to understand really well the regionalization legislation and be advocates with everyone. So if Faith and Order feels like the other one is more important, removing the harmful language, the discriminatory language, then then we can be advocates in our own groups to say, this is the reason that regionalization is so important. So we all get to be really good advocates and champions for it if we understand it well.
And speaking, if we understand it well, how I understand it, one thing that could be shared, let's say with African delegates or from other conference outside the US, is that by doing regionalization, they would not lose anything of the power or structures or how they have it. It's just a matter of being fair so that every conference would have, or every central conference would have the same things. Because right now, they vote for things that are not binding for their conferences. And so it's just a matter of having everybody being the same.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. It gets us all in the same fair standing, that we deal with matters that relate to our area, our region, rather than dealing with matters that relate to specifically to another region. It is wrong for the United States to tell the Philippines or Africa or Europe how to run their business of their church, and to tell them how to answer the call of God, just like the other way around. And when we're a maturing church to be a global church, we have to quit being colonial. And I think, if the United States tells everybody else what to do, we're being colonial. And, if we're going to be on the same footing, we need to quit doing that. And now they have more votes, and now they can do it to us. And it's maybe fair that they could do it to us, but at the same time, we should have given that up a long time ago. We should have grown up as a church a long time ago and gotten rid of that kind of power that the United States had over the rest of the church. Because we're pretending to be a global church. We were really a national church trying to have global outposts. And we should have given that up a long time ago. And that's part of the repentance the church needs to have, is to let go of that power over others. And regionalization gives everybody their own power.
What is the counter argument? I'm really now curious of what is the counter argument? What is the people that are really opposing it and are championing, not supporting it? What is the counter argument?
I have to admit, I haven't read any of the pieces about it, but I know one of the things that has been talked about is that we would it would fracture the church, so that we truly we wouldn't be a global church any longer, because each regional body would have a different kind of authority.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. There's the general scare tactics of sexuality and abortion that get brought up in the conversation, and what would happen in the US, and you need to protect them from hurting themselves, that kind of presentation. But the more sort of ecclesiological, the churchy argument is that it changes the nature of connectionalism, that we're not connectional in the same way anymore. And so what does autonomous connectionalism look like? And is that really Methodism? I would say we're already experiencing that, but in a slightly different way, because there is all of this autonomous Methodism in the Philippines, in Uganda, in the Ivory Coast, in Northern Europe. It's just not in the US.
Yeah, and going back to church history in 1968, when we decided that those who were in Latin America should be autonomous. Why did we do that? And I think it's an interesting hypothesis that some people throw out, because the theology of Latin America is different than Africa. And and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And I'd like Alejandro sometime to have a conversation about this, because I really, because I've heard people talk about why we did that, and why we didn't want them to be able to vote on things in the United States. And so we thought, let's make them autonomous, because we didn't know what to do with them and we didn't want them around. And that had to do with the power block of conservatives in the church that didn't want them around. So it's just really strange things that we chose to do at certain times in our history. And what was the real motivation? And, you know, so how do we really find equity and find that fair route? And what does connectionalism really mean? I like you asking that question, Nate, because we need to wrestle with that. And how do we live that, if that's really what the United Methodist Church is? And autonomous regionalization of a connectional church, what does that mean? And what does a global, you know, social principles mean? I don't have any all the answers. I just have lots of questions.
I was gonna say I'll be on renewal leave in January, so I'll have lots of time. Very love to talk to you about it. And to answer your question, it's I have no idea, but if I were to put in the shoes of, you know, non-US delegates, the first thing that comes to mind is like, if nothing changed, if my central conference still get to decide, like, why would I vote for it? Like, so that could be one thing. Then you add that the scourge tactic of abortion and gay marriage and everything. So I think it would be good, and I don't know where to start, but I'm thinking out loud. If we can find or see if somebody's already doing this work, like are there not even delegations, but individual delegates in some of the central conferences that would be willing to consider you know, regionalization. You mentioned the African Forum, Katie, so maybe contact them or see if there's a group that has already contacted them and see how can we support, like you, Mike, were saying, support their efforts, instead of saying like, oh, the US thinks you should do this, but you know, just support the work that they're doing.
How is the funding coming for that African Forum meeting? Are they able, has that come to fruition?
I'm not sure about that, Mike.
And the other thing I'm planning on doing is sharing some of the videos that we saw from the central conferences in our local church. Because I think that those were such compelling arguments that they had, and
Absolutely. I saw Kay's hand was up.
Well, that was what I was going to refer to, was what Mike was referring to, is that from those videos and those conversations, it was like they were lifting up their freedom to, I mean, to have that freedom to be in their own context and what that would do for them as within their area. Being, I mean, even though they do, by having the regionalization out there playing, then it is very much, you can then work on it, publicize it. It's an open forum to say, yes, we are free to develop our church within our own context, without having to go back door or to have differing messages from other parts of the church.
Yeah.
That freedom to operate and to do what's best for our church within our context.
Absolutely. And I will look into if we have permission to share those through our communications channels, and get those out in a different way. I want to transition, speaking of communication, since we have about 10 minutes left. One of the communications pieces is that we're wanting to update our conference page for our delegation with new folks. And so if you didn't see in the email, there's a place where you can update your delegation bio. And I put that in the chat so that you had easy access to that as well, but it was in the email that I sent. We've talked a little bit about priorities, and if you would like to be part of a team working on one of the videos, so communications was going to be working on them, but as delegates, we also are communicating, and so this could be something we do in conjunction with each other. And so, for example, if you'd like to be part of creating a video about why regionalization and how that will impact us, or why social principles and how that will impact us, let me know, because I will put us together and we can create some teams to work on that. I'm going to share my screen. So in today's email, I also sent a link to Discord. Discord works a lot like Slack. And some of us utilized Slack earlier for, let's see if I made that big, for the delegation gatherings. And what you'll notice is that when you sign in, there's a whole bunch of stuff on the left-hand side. And these are called channels. And it's set up so that you can kind of keep track of things. So like our delegation meetings, I put a link to the meeting we had before. Notes and resources, these might be like handy things like, you know, what's our roles and expectations. If we've got pieces like that regionalization series from the UMC, we can post those things. There's a channel for caucus groups because there are so many that are going. I kind of did a summary of the different groups, but this would be a great place to post a link. So if there's an article that comes out or something that a group's advocating for, you can put it here. One of the things we had before was that previously each person had been assigned just to their particular legislative committee. I've kept this open because even though you might be in Faith and Order, you might have heard something related to church and society, or you might want to share resources. So this is a place to have conversations about those particular areas. And to put a message, you just type down at the bottom. And so you type your message and you post it. So that's there. Off topic is if you want to just have a, you know, you can just share random things. This also has 2 voice channels. And so something that your group could do is, let's say you have a small group that's going to be gathering to talk about like your team here to talk about financial administration. You could use one of those discussion rooms to do either voice or video chat. So, and you can just hop into it and hop out of it. You don't have to set up a Zoom account or meeting or anything like that. So that's a really brief overview of Discord. What kinds of questions do you have? And you may just need to play around with it. Do you have any questions about using it? You can drag and drop files into Discord. You can access it on an app on your phone. You can do it. This was the web version, but you can also download the app and use it through the app as well.
So to get to it, you just type in Discord and you get to it, or?
Yeah, so that link I sent you will be an invite to this particular server. And when you go to Discord, you would log in and it will take you to on the left-hand side. Let me pull that back up. It will have any channel that you're connected to. And so, so you would look for the Iowa Conference one and it will take you to that. I also have like a young clergy one that I have. So that should get you straight there. If there's anything you need to see on Discord or you want someone to post, you can also make a request. I would suggest, let me show, actually this would be helpful. You can, trying to remember, I think it's here. Nope. You can make adjustments to your own profile. So if you click on our title and you can edit your server profile, I would say for your nickname, I would put your real name because this is what people in the channel will see. And so it might be really helpful to have your name so that the folks you're engaging with know who you are, since this is a group where we know each other in real life. So that is something I would I would do so that I know if I'm talking to Fred or if I'm talking to Mike. You also should be able, if you put at and then someone's name, you should be able to directly message them if something comes up. Any other communications or connection questions? Okay, well, we're getting close to 1 o'clock. I want to respect our time. Anything else for the sake of the group? Okay. Would someone like to send us out in prayer?
I will.
Thanks, Melissa.
Yes, and thank you for your prayers. My husband has blood clots in his lungs, and so we are not knowing what to do about that. So I appreciated the time at the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's be in an attitude of prayer. Holy God, as we come to this space, we know it doesn't feel as intimate as getting together in person, but your spirit binds us anyway. Lead us as we go out and do the work that you've called us to do. Help us to remember that we are working for your glory, not our own. And God, most of all, help others to see you working through us. Amen.
Amen. And prayers for your spouse, Melissa, as well.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.